That's who he was in Ridley Scott's Gladiator back in 2000. He is Russell Crowe, and he won Best Actor Oscar for that role. The year before, loads of awards for The Insider. The year before was LA Confidential, and there's also Master and Commander and Cinderella Man, American Gangster and Robin Hood and Man of Steel and Les Miserables. Well, Russell Crowe is appearing this day week at the Olympia in Dublin, that's October 1, as part of a 5-piece band called Indoor Garden Party, who have an album out called The Musical. Well, he's here now with a couple of members of the band, so before I talk to him and them, let's take a track, or a bit of a track anyway. Everything I Touch.
Everything I touch bursts into flame. Everything I love gets burned to the ground.
Everything I Touch is what it's called, and that is the opening number on the album I have in my hand here. The album I have in my hand here is called The Musical, and the people involved, well, there's a 5-piece more or less, I think. We've got three-fifths of the band here in front of me, and you're all very welcome, folks. That would be Carl, and that would be Scott, and that would be Russell as well. You're all here. You've been here the last few days. Have you had a good time, first of all, folks?
Yeah, we have. We went out for a little bit of a beer last night, and then stroll around this morning. Funnily enough, this is my 4th time, I think, in Dublin, but 2 firsts I've had. The principal first was the sun was shining yesterday, and I've never been to Dublin on a sunny day. And then this morning, I actually got out of a hotel room and went somewhere other than a hotel room or a TV station while in Dublin. I know that sounds kind of wacky, but apart from going to a rugby game in 2003 at Lansdowne Road, which I hear has now been renamed with a sponsor's name.
That's right, the Aviva Stadium, yeah.
Oh, it is it? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, that's the last time I had any social time in Dublin was 2003.
Okay, well, Russell Crowe, that is, you have been in Dublin a good few times. What about you two guys, Scott and Carl? Have you ever been here before?
No, I have not. I'm Irish, and that's my first time on these in this land.
Start all that again, Scott. You're what?
I'm Irish and never been
in the American sense.
Oh yeah, I've been. My parents told me I was Irish.
As in, he roughly knows what day St. Patrick's Day is.
Right.
Okay, and you're absolutely right.
As Irish as he gets.
Okay, if I asked you straight out, what date is St. Patrick's Day? It's the same every year.
It's either the 14th or the 27th.
It isn't actually, no.
I swear to God.
It's not actually, no.
It isn't? 17th.
No. Very good.
Gosh.
17th of March. Very good indeed, yeah.
It's not my day for quizzes, Russ.
What about you, Carl? Where are you from?
I'm from Sweden.
You're from Sweden?
Yeah.
So wait a minute. This is a multicultural band of, I mean, like...
Yeah, we were chatting before, off air before we started, you know, the hardest thing about this band, I live in Australia, Scott lives in Los Angeles, Alan Doyle lives in Newfoundland, Samantha Barks lives in London, and Carl lives in Sweden. So rehearsals are extremely difficult. So when we actually get a date, when we're going to do a live show, it's a very rare thing for us. We've been doing shows and working together since roughly about 2009. But, you know, we certainly have to put the work in schedule-wise to make sure we can do it. And
the gaps in between, I presume, are very large indeed.
They're large gaps, but they're all about, you know, in those times when we do see each other, it's about writing songs and just singing together and hanging out, you know.
But like, Scott, would you sit down and collaborate with this guy, or do you do it over the phone? Do you send little bits down by email?
Both. I mean, and so, you know, when we first started writing together, Russ and I, he would have lyrics and hand them to me, and I would just put, you know, kind of the Elton John, Bernie Taupin kind of
right.
way. And then, but we've also done where I send him a little gibberishy idea and sing it, and then he writes lyrics
and
to
then
it.
I have to sort of reverse engineer it because he's got a particular melody line completely stuck in his head. Yeah. So from a, like, down to the exact syllables, you have to sort of play it out so he can just now sing that melody line, which again is, I suppose it is a very Elton John.
Yeah,
Bernie
and they're
Taupin
both totally different kinds of songs, because when he writes, it's such a beautiful poet, you have to then take those words and put music to them. So you're
Well, hold on a second now. Is he a beautiful poet? Is he that good?
Unbelievable. I mean, I'm not, you know, that Alan Doyle and everybody agrees that the lyrics that come out of this man, I just cannot believe that people
Okay, but hold on.
this.
He's been musicking for a long time, as well as, of course, obviously acting as well. What have you been doing? I mean, have you been doing other bands down through the years?
No, I'm an actor. Mainly,
right.
I did, you know, grew up doing theatre and singing, and have done my own records. But
Jeepers,
mainly,
Carl, save us here. Are you music all the way? Are you? Have you done just music in any way at all?
Yeah.
Well, Dave, you got to take a bit step back with that. You know, Scott was on Broadway at the age of 9.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, Scott's done how many of your own albums now?
3 albums now. Yeah.
Right. So music is a huge part of Scott's life, as it is with many people who are actors. You know, Anthony Hopkins is a concert pianist. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, music and acting are very, you know, they're synonymous. They go with each other in many ways. You know, one of them is simple emotional expression, but the melody and being able to pick out a melody is, you know, that's where accent work comes from. That's where all these other things come from. You'd be very hard pressed to find somebody you consider to be a great actor who doesn't have an instrument.
Yeah, okay, well now, since you are the great actor, go right back to the, let's hope I get this right, the interrogatives. 15 years of age in a bloody school, you were useless, I believe, were you?
The interrogatives.
All right, okay, fair enough.
But that was actually...
You were bad, were you?
We started off with, it was a three-piece, and the drummer, whose name was Dave, so we called it Dave Decent and the interrogatives, and then for a number of rehearsals, he had like the worst smelling feet. So we changed the name of the band to Dave Deceit and the interrogatives, and he got so upset. Yeah, that was just a high school band. But I've been in bands. Earlier than that, there was a band called The Profile that I was in. My first record came out in 1981. It's just something it's part of my life. It's, you know, it's in my DNA.
Yeah,
I don't
because like when
make
you
my
were
living
like
from it
doing
as
the,
such.
like I mean, like it's 20 years now since LA Confidential. When you were doing all the biggest movies around, people always said, "Oh yeah, he's in a band they called 30 Odd Foot of Grunts." I mean, whatever happened to them and who were they? And that's just another band,
Yeah, but that band ran from 1984 to 2003.
right?
So it was around for a long time, and I think we did 3 or 4 albums with that band, or 3 albums and some EPs, you know. So that was a significant band, but it got to a point where, in a strange way, the fame of my day job made that band's existence very difficult.
Yeah.
You know, and we were getting opportunities and stuff that were really more related to what I was doing in movies. So that had a negative effect on the soul of the band, you know. So it started to feel unhealthy, and that was also, you know, the end of that band is at the beginning of the internet, and I mean, we were getting 3.5-4 million individual hits a month at one point, but we didn't know what to do with it, you know, because nobody had learned how to monetize it or anything like that, you know. So we have our core audience even today is basically people who like to steal music and find it in other places. They don't buy CDs or whatever. They share stuff amongst themselves. So it's quite, you know, it's always a surprise to us when we go and play places, how many people actually
And
come.
then after that, then where does the Ordinary Fear of God come in? Was that another bunch of just another bunch of musicians? I'll just give it a different name.
No, well, actually, that was kind of like there was a couple of guys that crossed over from 30 Odd Foot of Grunts, Dave Kelly and Stuart Cohen, into the Ordinary Fear of God. But the Ordinary Fear of God was a band where I wanted to write more articulate songs, and 30 Odd Foot of Grunts had a very heavy rock bass to it for a lot of the time, and so, you know, it was just a fresh approach, and that was the first time that I worked with Alan Doyle, who's a member of this band. He produced the Ordinary Fear of God album.
Well, where does the first solo album come in then? My Hand, My Heart. Was that the Ordinary Fear of God? Was that? Can I say you have a solo album?
My Hand, My Heart was Ordinary Fear of God.
Oh, well, it was Ordinary Fear of God.
Yeah,
I get you.
yeah.
Right, okay.
The next one, the Crowe Doyle Songbook Volume 3. Don't go looking for volumes 1 or 2 because they don't exist. I know it's a perverse title, but yeah, that's just me and Alan writing together. We wrote our first song together in 2004, I believe, and it's a song called Raywin, which is on that Crowe Doyle Songbook Volume 3. Is it? I forget.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that first song that we wrote together is why we still write together. And oddly, in my life, I've written songs with lots of people, but Alan Doyle, who is a Canadian from Newfoundland, who used to be in a band called Great Big Sea, he now has an act called Alan Doyle and the Beautiful Gypsies. That first song was such a potent collaboration, and that's why we've kept writing. And he's the guy in my life that I've written the most songs with, and I actually, am privileged to be the guy that he's written the most songs with as well.
Okay, but I was trying to get to the point, like, if it was solo, like, you'd be on stage, you'd be smoking, you'd be swearing, you'd be joking, you'd be dancing, you'd be explaining the songs as well. Is there room? Will these guys let you get anything near that? Or like, shut up, Russell, we want to play.
I do tend to have a chat. every now and then.
I think that's the best part,
I like
though.
to tell a story, because that's the thing, is all these songs are real. They're not just manufactured.
Yeah.
They come from experiences, you know, and some of those experiences are not pleasant. And, you know, the way you deal with that is you take a sort of a poetic perspective and you reduce that experience into a 3-minute song.
And a 3-minute song, could I say that somewhere along the way, if I'm not saying Bruce Springsteen for a second, but the concerns that he might have in terms of his songwriting is something that would appeal to you as well? That's a route you wouldn't mind taking. The common man.
Sort of, no, not necessarily. I'm definitely a fan of a few songs of his, but I wouldn't say overall as a noob that is anything that I lean into. I think you need to listen to the album in its totality, particularly this one, because it plays more like a playlist rather than an album. Every song has a completely different vibe, a completely different perspective, and on a revolving thing, it also has a different voice, because this band is 4 singers and a producer.
Okay, by the way, we are talking, that's the voice, of course, of Russell Crowe. Now, just the point about it is that you guys there, like, was it just that he wanted to do something, he got you guys to come along, because it was the same, the ethos of what you wanted was that everybody comes together, be really good at what they do, but also enjoy each other's company playing. Is that really what it's about?
Yeah, but it started, I met Russell in 98 on a movie and we just sang together. I've done background vocals on all those records you just said, The Ordinary Fear of God. And
so the connections are really quite deep. I met Carl, it's a strange story. I was at, do you know who Delta Goodrem is here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she was having a party in Los Angeles, and she asked me to go because there was this Swedish producing duo, and she wanted me to meet them, and I just happened to be working on some songs, and it worked out that, they were willing to go outside to the Suburban, put the CD on of the demos and have a listen, because that's what you do in LA. You get a better sound in the car rather than in the stereo. So we went out, and they're very polite, and they liked them well enough or whatever. They said thank you very much, and they went back inside. And there was this one bloke still sitting in the back of the Suburban, and he said, "Could you play me that first song again?" So okay, so I played it to him again, and this very quiet voice, he said, "I think I can improve that song." And I thought, okay, so what's what does he mean by that? So I said, being a smart ass, I said, by what percentage? Thinking he was going to come back with 10,000% or 1,000% or whatever. And he thought about it for probably nearly a minute. And then he said, I believe 30%. So I just thought that was so cool.
And did
humble.
he?
And we just started talking, and that's, here we are still working together.
Right, okay, that's a good introduction to yourselves. What about the music itself, the genres, the types? I mean, is it everything? Does it go from rock to folk?
No, absolutely no limits. If I'm, that's the funny thing you have sometimes with a band, is that everything has to go through that filter. So everything has to sort of have a similar feel or whatever sometimes. But this band has none of those constraints, because I'm writing for voices that I love listening to, and then I want that individual to make this song absolutely their own. It's going to be part of their, their own DNA, part of their, every breath that they take kind of thing, So we do tend to, the concerts fly and move from place to place, quite largely because you have that thing. It's a different front person coming on with every song.
So, in other words, like the different thing that can happen every single night on stage is one of the most attractive things about it at all. You really haven't got a clue what might happen at any individual gig. Because like a lot of gigs you go to these days, everything is so perfect and so programmed and so whatever, because they're playing to 80 or 90,000 people, and it kind of has to. Yours is loose every night, or is it?
Yes.
Well, he has the impression of that.
Yeah, and this is a little bit different this time.
Yeah, this time round we're actually playing with a lot more elements on stage than we have.
There's structure,
previously.
but there's room in between to...
Yeah, see, I appreciate it if I go to someone like a Springsteen concert, right? Yeah. But you can go to that concert probably, and I'm not bagging Bruce at all. He's obviously a legend, but he'll have a story he's going to tell on this particular tour, right? And he'll tell that story, hit the button of that story, and everybody's focused on that, and that story works really well, and he tells it night after night, and you can go and see the same tour 3 months later, and he's going to tell that story, But I don't like to work like that, because each one of these songs has a story. So, one night it's going to be the story about this song, and the next night it might be some other song, Also, though, the great thing about being live is this group of people, they're brand new, so this is going to be a Tonight Show. And you don't want to, be so blinkered that you have to hit certain moments or whatever and ignore what's going on in front of you, because that's actually the best thing. So sometimes you'll be doing something and you get a certain vibe from the audience, so that's where you take the show with that vibe,
Do you know, funny thing is, the way a lot of people want to do the big screen, and they want to do theatre or whatever, and theatre they always say is more visceral and more real, more in your face, and the audience this, and you get the smell of the grease paint and all the rest of it. Is this in some ways your theatre?
Yeah, well, I did a lot of theatre.
Yeah, I know, but this one now is better.
Before I did a feature film, I'd done 2,000 live performances, and that's theatre, that's working with bands and what have you. But very, it's a simple way of putting it. But yeah, this, for me, because of that immediacy, not just this particular group, but rock and roll in general, my relationship to bands after a certain age in general, is because of the anarchy of it. You go and do a theatre show. You book in for a theatre show as an actor, right? You're going to do 8 shows a week for 8 weeks. You're going to do 64 performances. And you have to work with the same material, unless you're lucky enough to do something like the Rocky Horror Show, which I did when I was young. I did like 415 performances of that. And you can actually change that show every night. You can respond to the audience. You can break that fourth wall. And, that energy, that adrenaline, that anarchy, that's actually the fun thing about performing live for people, there was a point when I was a younger actor where I did want to play Stanley. I did want to do iconic roles. Yeah, but, your time passes, and if you don't get that opportunity to be Hamlet when you're the right age, then, you've just got to move on. And I actually found, I did a few theatre gigs where I found it torturous, especially after I'd experienced the detail that you can go into on a film set. Yeah. Because everything's always blurred in the theatre, It's an impression, But when you've got the camera right up in your face and every single person can read every twitch and pulse in your eyeballs, now you're talking about really taking people on a journey emotionally. So it kind of changed for me. I loved theatre, but then I experienced film, and it became my thing. And to get the sort of balance of that detail and the structure and the strictness of film, my theatre side became a little bit more anarchic. And so the music took over.
Wow, there's an answer, all right. Okay, we're talking about the musical, by the way, which is now perfect.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, it was very good.
That's
the
north
musical.
of America.
Is it?
Yeah, it is, yes. It's very cold
You
up
can
there.
only go there on the 17th of March.
Yeah, I was just...
The musical is what it's called. The album, that is. Indoor Garden Party is the band, or the collective, should I say, or does it matter?
The Hive Mind.
The Hive Mind. Okay, fair enough. Now, Midnight. Tell me about this. Is it different than what I was playing earlier on, or does it stand out differently on the album?
Yeah. You want to tell the story?
Yes. Well, we, like I said, Russell and I started playing music in '98 and never really wrote anything together. And then when we did a movie called Robin Hood, and we wrote a song, and then I got really comfortable with the idea of writing with him, because I was a little nervous at first. And I sent him this gibberish song of me just
gibberish.
It was really, but what I did keep repeating on this demo,
word.
Midnight, and it was funny because I probably
blah 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 midnight,
and I probably said the word 25 times in the gibberish song.
Okay, well, let's give it a blast from the musical, which is the name of the album. This is Indoor Garden.
Let's just tell you a little bit about what the song's about, though, because this is fits in a very slim genre. This is a love song for married people with children.
Right, a love song for married people with children. Midnight. And that's what it's called, Midnight, from the musical, the album, from Indoor Garden Party. 3/5 of whom are here with me now in the studio, just as a matter of interest in terms of the gaps in between all gigs and all the rest. Might I get the impression from the way you're so sort of into all this that it's a possibility that you might sort of stay together longer, or for a longer period of time, or get a tour going a bit longer, or not give it a few years in between meeting each other?
Well, it really has to sort of have its own life, and how often we play and everything ultimately will be dictated by a potential audience, So, we know that we can go pretty much anywhere and sell 400 tickets, for example, but we're playing here in Dublin at the Olympia, where it's like double that. So we're about to find out if we can actually sell many tickets, But it's funny, before you were talking about, me doing this in a part-time way in Scotland, but see, that's not how it is. Music is inside you. If it's inside you, it's just part of your life, and you're always picking up a guitar, you're always fiddling and noodling and stuff like that. So it's not that, that there's a big black hole and then once every 2 years you come out of it and do something musical. It's not that at all. It's just I don't have any desire to take on a set of corporate responsibilities that are about music. I've done that a long time ago, and it's just not my thing. So this is like the fourth record, where it's just a completely independent release. We have some cool people that help us with that and everything, but we're not obligated to make it. It's not a product in that sense, and we don't have to go out and pump it in that sense. It's all just about the love for.
Well, don't forget, the industry, for want of a better word, has changed so much. The movie industry has changed too, but my God, the music industry is just completely. It's been
same things happening in movies now.
Do you think so?
In the last 3 years, there's been probably 7 films that I was attached to that are strong, adult dramas that require, a little bit of a budget because they're set in somewhere exotic or somewhere extreme or whatever, and they've just fallen over. And some of them as close as being a week away from production starting. So it's a bit of a minefield out there at the moment.
Wait a minute, did you mean falling over afterwards when it's all made and didn't make enough money kind of thing?
No, falling over before it gets made. Right. So, these are films that have been financed, and then something in the process of that financing doesn't tick all the boxes, and so the film just stops.
Well, you've got Marshall Conlon being what? Is it being made? Is it being done? Is that not
Boy Erased?
Is it not with Nicole Kidman and Joel Egerton? He's directing.
The movie's called Boy Erased.
Oh, right. Is that the title of it now? Right. Okay.
I'll go straight from Dublin to Atlanta and be a Southern Baptist preacher.
Right, and it's
I've already worked on the physique.
Really? Have you?
I'm seeing it. You look like
I'm ready.
a Southern Baptist preacher.
But just on that, it's a gay conversion movie. So
it's
on that level,
from my perspective, it is about parents, one of whom happens to be a preacher whose child comes out to them, and the decision of the father, who's the preacher, is that his son should go through homosexual conversion therapy.
And what about what's happening in Australia at the moment? And I would have to ask, the same-sex vote and all the rest of it. Should the law be changed to allow same-sex couples to marry? That's what the ballots are asking. Yeah,
it's a strange way of doing it, because it's been very clear, since the 70s in Australia that, the vast majority of the population believe that love is love, and people should just be allowed to get on with their lives and not have interference at that level. But, I do, and I can't often say this, I do have a lot of trust in the current Australian Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. He's an erudite man, he's a smart fella, and he's a man with a good heart. But what I think he's trying to do is take a path where, when he gets to that point where the decision is made, everybody's had a chance to have their chat. There's not going to be that, hangover of people saying, but I didn't really get to make my point, So he wants it to be such a definitive decision when it's made that it's just done and we now move forward.
Okay, well listen, just getting back finally then to the music, and the big screen you're still going to keep doing there, Russell, aren't you?
Look man, I love my job, there's been many challenges I've put in front of myself with my job where it sort of freaked me out a little bit, and the current one is very challenging as well, stepping into this role, because he's a real man, and you have to honour, if you play a real person, you have to honour that person as deeply as you can. So it's going to be a challenge and all that, but I do love my job, and I know every time I'm walking towards the camera on a film set, I just have a sort of a quiet sense of calmness, because this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm very lucky in that way.
And has Boy Erased finished filming? Will that be out?
No, I'm leaving from Dublin to fly to Atlanta to do that. And the other thing that happens in that film is Nicole Kidman's playing my wife. So, you got your bucket list, tick.
Yep.
She's not going to get 100 million off me like she got off that other bloke, though. Seriously, I'm going to be married to her for 2 weeks, then I'm gone, man.
Yeah. Indeed. Okay. Well, listen, the band. I mean, if it's October 1, which is the Sunday in the Olympia in Dublin. Where do you go with it after that, in terms of the band now I'm talking about?
Well, it's going to be based on on the next time we get some dates. I mean, if you look at Alan, for example, he's got a new album coming out. He's got his second book coming out. Samantha's got this gigantic job somewhere we can't tell you about. No. Scott is in the middle of this show, The Orville, with Seth MacFarlane, which, you know, debuted to an audience of 15 million people on a cable channel, which is amazing. And Carl is in the middle of, 5 Seconds of Summer, and who else are you producing at the moment?
Yeah, straight off to LA to finish off a record with them, and then a couple of other projects at the same time.
At the same,
Carl's the quiet one. Carl's kind of like the George Harrison of this outfit.
That's why you sleep in the studio, yeah, right. You're too busy doing it all. Actually, one thing about the movie, just one thing about Boy Erased, that Flea is in it.
Yeah. Yeah, he was in town last night, right?
Did I just see Flea 3 nights ago at the 3 Arena on stage? That same Flea, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be cool. Right, there's a lot of great young actors in the movie, and it's being directed by Joel Edgerton.
Yeah, who's in the movie as well.
He's in it as well, and he's a young Australian actor. And it's great pleasure for Nicole and I, we talked about it, that we can actually, you know, do a film for a young Aussie actor who's also breaking through as a director. It's kind of like, you know, the next generation. It feels good to be in that place, you know.
Right, yeah. And just finally on the movies, does it feel like 20 years since LA Confidential?
Oh yeah, it does. You know, but
I thought it was more than that.
I started making movies in 1989, so you know, I started being an actor in 1970. The age of 6, I did a TV show called Spy Force, but I didn't get a lead role in a feature film till 1989, and it's been sort of continuous since then. But yeah, LA Confidential was an absolute lifetime ago, man. You know, it was, you know, that's pre-kids, it's pre-awards, it's pre...
They're making a television series, you know? Did you hear that?
Pretty good checks.
Of LA Confidential, are they?
They've done that before too, though.
Yeah. Oh, they just announced it a week ago.
Yeah. Yeah, they've done that before.
But again, anything can happen.
All right, well, listen, guys, thank you very much indeed, and enjoy yourself on stage at the Olympia. That's October 1st, which is Sunday. The Midnight was the last track I played. I'm going to play one final one now from the musical. Indoor Garden Party is the band, and the track is called Out of Range. Anything special about Out of Range? Or?
Yeah, it's gigantic. We were actually in Queensland on the bow of a boat.
Russ and I,
Scott and I were talking about, you know, the pitfalls of life and the vagaries of life and love and everything, and how particularly actually that conversation was about Scott's divorce, which was coming up on 10 years past at that point. And as we were talking about all of these things to do with life, and the gag in the middle of this is that in 2002 Scott was supposed to come and visit me in Australia, and then he changed his mind and he didn't come. But my mother, when he finally got there in 2010, my mother had the moleskin pants, the R.M. Williams shirt, and the boots, the cowboy hat, and the belt she'd bought for Scott in 2002, and she had it sitting on his bed when he arrived. I think the pants were a bit tight. Let's not go through that. Yeah, so we were standing on the bow of this boat in a place called the Nara Inlet on Hook Island, and we're talking about all this serious life stuff, and the two of us are there, and we just look down in the water, and coming towards us, just 6 inches under the water, was this gigantic black and white striped manta ray, a wingspan of at least 9 foot. And it was one of those moments where we didn't have time to get a camera or call out to the kids. It was like we had 2 seconds of it right there.
Oh, I get the chills even thinking about it.
And even though there's no manta rays mentioned in this song, and no manta rays were hurt during the writing of this song, this song starts with a manta ray.
Okay, so the start of the manta ray, it is called Out of Range. Thank you very much indeed, Carl, Scott and Russell as well. Here goes.